What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today is part two of our two-part series on revenue management together with my colleague, Kaye. She is the CMO. She's a marketing expert. She leads the marketing department at Freewyld. And she is going to ask me questions about revenue management, which I'm very excited to continue the conversation from a few days ago. So, Kaye, thank you again for being here. And yeah, I'm excited to see what questions you're going to fire at me today.
We must not have scared Jasper too much from the last episode. So thank you for having me back, Jasper. And I am excited to dive even deeper into revenue management. I am a marketer at heart, and I know that there are a lot of very technically minded marketers, but I am definitely more on the creative side of things. So I love this conversation. I'm learning so much about pricing and how to improve profitability for short-term rental operators. And I know that a lot of people who are listening are learning a lot as well. So let's continue our conversation that we started a couple days ago. We left off our last episode talking about some amazing client results. And I want to come back to that. Maybe that's the marketer in me. Like, it's just super fun to see the impact that this service is having on people. So I understand that you did a little bit of prep work and you have some more examples of the impact that this can have on a business. So I'll let you take that.
Yeah, for sure. And before we dive into the numbers, maybe we can explain a little bit about the process when people join our service, like what actually happens. Because we essentially we mapped out kind of like the first 90 days of working together. Because you gotta, as we touched on the first episode, like every part of the business somehow relates to how much revenue we are driving in the end of the day, right? So when we start working with a new client, obviously we're not going to lift their performance 20% from the day that they start working with us, right? The first 30 days is really what we call, it's the onboarding phase. It doesn't always take 30 days, but sometimes it takes 2 weeks, sometimes it takes 3 weeks. But this is essentially where we get on Zoom and we're going to go through the entire business. So we need to know everything, like what's your team, your operations, your marketing, the regulations in your market, like the owners, if you're managing, like what are the owner restrictions, right? Because I can come up with a brilliant pricing strategy, but if then the owner comes and says, well, I don't want to rent out my house for less than $300, then it's like, okay, well, now I got to change my strategy, right? So we got to know everything that happens in the business. And this is one of my favorite parts, actually, of working with a new client, is like dissecting their entire business. It's a very fun process. And we oftentimes find a lot of potential possible improvements, right, in the operation, on the operational side or on the marketing side, which is very exciting. But that first 30 days is where at some point in those 30 days we call it like we're passing the baton. So that's like the day that we literally start taking over the pricing and the revenue management. And then it takes a little bit of time for us to reach our full potential, right? We always say between 1 and 3 months, we should see that upside that we believe that we can realize. So the reason why I mentioned that is because we have some clients that we started working with recently. And June was really the first month that we were able to impact the portfolio, right? So we started working with these clients like end of April, beginning of May. So that first 30 days, that's we don't have too much impact on the portfolio, but then that next month is always the most exciting month. So because that's the first month where we're like, okay, let's see, are we doing a good job, right? So I looked at 2 clients that we started working with. June was really the first month that we impacted their portfolio, and I calculated how much improvement we were able to make. And we touched a little bit on this last time, but that's a whole question in itself. Is like, how do we actually measure our performance, right? Because a lot of hosts that apply for our service, I ask them like, hey, how's your performance so far this year? And if their performance is down, they usually say, well, we're not doing so great, but it's probably the market, the market is weak. And then I look at the data, I'm like, well, your market is actually up like 10% so far this year. A lot of hosts are just not aware of that, right? And without that awareness, like you got to know how you're performing in order to like understand how to improve, right? So long story short, so I compared the way that we measure our performance. We adjust for the market, but we look at like, hey, how's your performance so far this year, right? Compared to like what the market's been doing, and then we say, okay, there's this cutoff time where we say, okay, this is before we took over, and this is after we took over, right? How does that compare? Now we have data on those two clients that I mentioned. Client number one, of course, I can't, for confidentiality, I can't name the say the name of the company, etc. But I will say that this client is in a beach market. So I looked at their RevPAR January through May, compared that to how their RevPAR a year ago, January through May, and then I adjusted for the market, and then I looked at like the month of June, how much RevPAR we did, compared that to last year, and adjusted for the market. And then in this case, we were able in June. So, well, let me go back. January through May, this client's performance was down 16% compared to 2023.
Ouch.
But then the market was actually up 13%.
Double
so they were
ouch.
really underperforming by 29%, which is probably the reason that they applied for our service. Now, in June, we were able to do 11.66% better than last year. And the market was up 15.35%, which means that we did, adjusted for the market, we were only down 3.7%. So until before we started working, they were down 29%, and now we're only down close to 4%. So, and that was just the first month of us having an impact, right? So that's really an improvement of 25%, which is pretty amazing for the first month. I typically think as I mentioned, I typically think that it'll take 2 or 3 months to really hit that, the maximum performance. But so, yeah, we were pretty happy with that 25%.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Any questions on that?
Yeah. Well, first, just an observation. It kind of reminds me of, have you ever heard the story? It's in Atomic Habits about the British cycling team, where they like systematically went through every single factor that could impact the speed of the racers. And they went from being one of the worst cycling teams to one of the best, just by finding those 1% improvement. So it sounds like a similar process where just changing one of those things probably isn't going to make a big impact, but the cumulative effect of making all of those little changes can have a massive difference on somebody's business, which is incredible. And that market adjusted look at your performance is so important, because it's so easy to blame the market or just have the market be like this big boogeyman or this like amazing friend that you don't really know what their motivation is, or like how that's actually impacting your business. And then just to make this clear, and you can use a super rough estimation, but that improvement of 20% that was made from the January through May timeframe into June, what did that translate to in dollars?
Oh, that's quite a lot of money, because I think this client probably did around 250 to 300K in June. So like if you take 25% of that, and that's a significant amount of money. 25% on 300K is $75,000, right?
Yeah.
Which is a lot more than they paid us for that month.
Yeah, and that's massive. So not only have they passed the baton and they no longer have to worry about revenue management and pricing and making all these adjustments and paying attention to all of the data and crunching numbers like Jasper loves to do, but they're also getting more back in their pocket at the end of the month than what they're investing in the service. So it's time back, plus they're making more money. It makes it just a no-brainer. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I think that's why our clients are very happy.
Yeah. It's
like, hey, I save you time and make you more money. Do you like that?
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Do you have another client example that you can share?
Yeah. And I was gonna say something else, but I forgot now. So I'll just go to the next client, and hopefully it'll come
It'll
back
come
to
to
me.
you.
Okay, so this other client, let me look at the numbers here. So this is a secondary city, right? So not the major city, but kind of somewhere in the 10 to 25 most populous cities in
Mhm.
the US. So this particular client in until the same thing like January through May, we compared it to June. So they were actually January to May, their RevPAR was down about 6%. And I remember when I started onboarding this person, they actually thought that the market was down, but the market was actually up 19%, which is
Wow.
pretty significant, right? Oh yeah, and now I know what I was going to say. When we calculate these performances, we only look at same store units, right? So like, yeah, if you have, let's say you have you know 5 1 bedrooms and 5 2 bedrooms and 5 3 bedrooms, and then you add 5 6 bedrooms, then your RevPAR is going to go through the roof, right? But that doesn't mean that your performance is better, right? So when we look at these numbers, we compare what they call same store sales. So if you hear like big companies like McDonald's or clothing stores talk about same store sales, that means that they're just comparing apples to apples, right? So we're only looking at the units that were active in for the last the period that we're looking at, right? So I just want to make that clear.
What's
Um,
it? Or,
okay, so
sorry, let me highlight that really quick. That it's really important, and we talked about this a little bit in our last episode. But if you don't do that, and it takes time, and it takes like precision to really pay attention and make sure that you're analyzing and making decisions off of the right data. But if you don't pay attention to that, the cumulative effect might feel like you're doing okay, but again, you just don't know until you look at it. So
mhm,
super important.
100%, 100%. So yeah, it's absolutely it's very important, because otherwise, you're looking at the wrong numbers if you include units that you've just onboarded, and that makes it kind of complicated too. Because I mean, if you just have one unit, it's very simple, right? You just like, look, how much money did I make? But if your portfolio is constantly changing, then it's very important to understand what numbers should I be looking at, and how do we really compare apples to apples, right? But yeah, so in this case, this client was down about close to 6% until we took over. The market was up 19% in that time frame. So he was really like underperforming by about 25%, right? And you'll notice that like most of our clients, most of the people that come to us are down, right, compared to last year. Because
Right.
if you're up, then you probably think that you're doing a great job, which could be true. But if the market is really strong, then you could still be underperforming, right? So anyway, so we took over the portfolio in June. Our client was up 29% compared to last year, and but the market was also very strong. So the market was up 32%. So kind of similar to our other clients. They were underperforming by about 25% until we started working together, and now in June we only underperformed 3.4%. So really, it made an improvement of just over 21.5% on this portfolio.
That's massive. And just to remind people, this is basically like it's 30 days after we like fully took over their portfolios, right? So it's kind of like the first month where
Yeah,
we're seeing the big impact.
it's only really the first month. So I still expect that there's going to be additional improvements to be made,
Oh, yeah.
because you know what, like a lot of the stuff also takes a little bit of time, right? Because we also need to learn the market by managing the revenue, right? Like, I learn every day, I learn more about the markets too. So I definitely expect the improvement of the performance to go up further in month 2, 3, 4, etc., as we saw in the example that we showed on the first part of our episode. And did you have any more questions on this? Because I wanted to touch on another very important topic as well.
No, go for it, Jasper. Let's hear it.
So yeah, so one thing that's really interesting that we've noticed is us working with our clients has turned into a powerful marketing and business acquisition tool, because most hosts like don't really know how to put together some numbers to show owners like how the performance is. And one of our clients now, that his owners are noticing like, hey, we're making a lot of money, and they started like referring a lot of people to our clients, right? And so it can really help. The just us being able, we can pull so many different data points and reports, right? So like we have some of our clients like will message me and be like, hey, this owner is like worried about our occupancy or whatever, right? And they're like bothering our client, those owners who are like calling and like, hey, what's going on, like, why are you pricing like that, what's the occupancy, blah blah blah. But those owners don't really know the real data, right? So I then can quickly pull a report and say like, hey, why don't you send this to your client, right? And it just shows like, hey, we're doing 20% better than last year, right? It's just like the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
So it turned out that like this is a good tool to keep current owners happy by just showing them the results versus them whatever they feel or their perspective is on like what's happening.
Well, and I
And number
know
two,
oh, sorry. Can you hold
I
that
was going to
thought for a
say number
second? Go
two,
ahead.
it's a strong business acquisition
Yeah,
tool.
that's where I was going.
Because I can show my client like, hey, listen, like, look, you look, he's talking to an owner with a 3-bedroom. I'm like, okay, well, let me pull a report and show you that our 3 bedrooms are doing like, 70% more revenue than the average in the market or something like that. And then our client can show that to the owner, and then they're more likely to join as a client because we can show that. And like I noticed that a lot of operators like don't really know what kind of reports to create, to kind of prove that.
Yeah. And then even for owner operators like Freewyld is our own rental, our little village of cabins, we're working on expanding. We are working on attracting more investment into the business and having that powerful clarity to show potential investors and our current investors exactly how we're performing and outperforming the market is really powerful as well. So even if you don't have those owner relationships to manage, maybe you have investor relationships to manage and you want to grow your portfolio and acquire more properties, that can be a really powerful competitive advantage or just advantage in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about the process, and just to recap and please, after I recap, Jasper, fill in anything that I missed. So somebody applies for the snapshot. We talked about the snapshot in our last episode, but in case you missed that one and you don't have the time to go back and visit, we are essentially for qualified hosts who are interested and curious about this service, but they're not sure if it's for them, or you don't really know how well you're doing, especially compared to the market and compared to all of these different variables. We take a free assessment, or we give you a free assessment of your portfolio to see and to tell you exactly how you're doing now. And if we were to work together, no pressure, how we think that we can impact your portfolio based on our experience. So they apply. If they're qualified, we do the snapshot, and then we move into this 90 minutes. Too bad it doesn't take 90 minutes. 90-day kind of intro period where particularly the first 30 days, we're learning everything possible about your business. So you're how do I say this? Like, you're not losing control. I think there's a little bit of an element of like nervousness or perceived risk where people are like, oh my gosh, like, what are you going to do with my pricing? But that 30 days is really to get to know your business and what your constraints are and what your unique market is. And then once we pass the baton, then we start this process of continuous improvement over time. Did I miss anything, Jasper?
No, but I'm happy that you brought this up, because there's one thing that I think it's really important to clarify, is that the way that we work with our clients, it's not like you give the baton to us and then we roll with it and you have no idea what's going on. That's not how we work. We are an extension of your team. So essentially, like, we become part of your team. I do a Zoom call every single week with all of our clients where we discuss the strategy, right? Because I need the input from the operator, because the operator knows the units better, the market better. They have information that I don't know. Plus, they have experience in the market, right? So anything that we do, we toss that at our clients and say like, hey, this is what we want to do. Do you have any objections against it? And sometimes people will have an objection against it, and then it makes sense. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what, like that actually makes a lot of sense, let's do it differently. So it's teamwork. I need the operator, and we need to together come to an optimal strategy. And so I don't do anything without consulting with our client, because that input that our client gives us is very important. And we have a very close relationship with our clients, where we go on Zoom every week. And we also have a Slack channel. We set up a Slack channel for each of our clients, so that anytime there's anything happening, like they can contact us on Slack, right? And with most clients, like I'll communicate throughout the week in Slack. And then, any topics that some thought, like we'll put those on the agenda for the Zoom calls.
Yeah, that's amazing. Are there any other frequently asked questions that you get from clients or potential clients where there's like either a misunderstanding or they're just nervous about something that you can address right now?
I don't know. Like, I think, well, one thing I will say is that typically when we do our assessment and we tell the client how much upside we think there is, that's usually met with a bit of skepticism, which I totally get. Because, I mean, look, I do revenue management for Freewyld. If somebody shows up and says like, hey, I can do 20% better than you, I would also be like, really? You think so? So I totally get the that part. No, I think I don't know if there's any.
Well,
I think we
let's address
covered
that real
kind
quick,
of
Jasper.
everything.
So I know that you spend a ton of time actually putting a lot of data into those snapshots and into that projection. What do you say to those clients? Like, what is different about the way that you do revenue management versus the way that most people do it?
Well, going back to what we were talking about on the previous episode, it's like most people just don't really do it. I mean, look, you set up your price labs, you set up your wheelhouse, you put in the base prices, you add some minimum stay settings, maybe like a last minute discount, or wheelhouse you can kind of just do recommended or aggressive or conservative, so people will click. And then it's funny because I go in there and I look at all the settings, and then I'll ask the host like, hey, why do you set it up this way? And oftentimes they don't really know, they forgot how to set it up in the first place. So they're like, so I'm like, what did you set it up like this? And they're like, oh, I don't know, like I did that a year ago and I've never changed it since then. So no, I mean, look, the biggest thing is just, most people just don't do the things that you have to do. They don't look at their data every day, right? They don't look at their occupancy every day. They just don't do the work, which is, I get it. Running a short-term rental company is not easy. There's a lot of work. You're wearing like 10 different hats. And customer service and getting the units turned over in time, that kind of stuff takes priority.
Yeah, because it's like a lot more urgent in the moment, right? Like it's
so for a lot of hosts, this revenue management is just kind of like a thing they look at once a week or something, and that's just that's just not optimal. You're not learning much. You're not. So that's the biggest thing is just doing it, right? But then also it requires knowledge. It requires a skill. It's a skill set, but it's also just something that you have to learn. Like I said, it's more of an art than a science. So you just need experience and knowledge to be able to put together a strategy that makes sense. And that experience is really important, and that's why it's so fun for me now. Like, because we have these we work with seven clients already, so we have all this experience looking at these different portfolios, and that's just a lot of fun.
The clients who are like, well, I have a fairly seasonal demand cycle where I do great for part of the year, but I only really kind of like struggle during this other part of the year. Can revenue and pricing management help kind of even out those highs and lows, or
Yeah.
what does that situation look like?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, seasonal markets are very interesting, right? We have a couple clients that are in the seasonal market where it's like June, July, August, and a little bit of September is where 80% of the money is being made. So, one of the biggest mistakes that I see in those markets is that people get really, really nervous if the summer isn't booked a couple months in advance, right? And so what those operators typically do is like their pricing is too low because they're afraid that their summer is not going to book up, because then that's why they make the money. So you got to like control your emotions and just do what's optimal. You got to understand like what's the booking window actually look like, how much demand is coming in the last month or so. A lot of a lot of hosts that I analyze the portfolio for, their summer will be booked up by April. I'm like, well, what about all the demand that's still coming? Like you're not taking advantage of that, but they just want to, they can sleep well knowing that the summer is booked, right? So that's just one thing that I see, that typically operators in those markets, I think they're too conservative, and so they get booked too far in advance. But also, how do you deal with the winter months? All right, like typically in those markets, I want to say November to March, there's very little, unless you're in a ski. Some markets are like ski and summer, right? But if you're not in the ski market, then basically that summer is where it's at. So what do you do the rest of the year? So one thing that we do for our clients, we implement like a midterm rental strategy, right? So we're trying to fill up as many as many units as possible with like 30-day stays, right? So like monthly stays. Because I mean, look, if you're in like you know uh Canada or the northern US, good luck. If you're not in the ski market, good luck getting bookings in January and February, right? And so
Yep.
it's better to like be ahead of the curve and already start marketing your units for midterm rentals during that period, or even like maybe finding one of our clients, like we're finding like students, for example, that will rent the units from like October to April, right? Now that's you're making more money than if you're trying to trying to scramble in the winter for these for bookings at like an ultra low ADR. Um, so yeah, seasonal markets are interesting. They're a bit more tricky to set up as part of a pricing strategy, because you really got to look at that booking window, right? If you're like in a major city, then most months are pretty similar. Booking window is pretty short, so you kind of have this very steady type of flow of bookings and income. Seasonal markets, you often have to create a separate profile, minimum night stay profile, and you might also have to create a separate settings for like your base price and your weekday pricing, because typically off season the weekends are way more popular than the weekdays, but in the middle of the summer the weekdays are also in very high demand, right? So schools are out, people travel during the week in the summer much more than outside of the summer, right? So there's definitely like a bit more complication when it comes to like creating a pricing strategy for those seasonal markets than with the city markets, the steady city markets. But there's also typically a lot more upside as a result, right? I mean, honestly, like setting up a strategy for a seasonal market, man, it's not that easy. It's
Well,
really not that easy.
in addition to all of the other benefits that we've been talking about, just having that third party who can be less emotional and like less staying up at night because of the anxiety of when you think that you should be booking, and show you the actual data of the demand and how it's shifting and how it's changing and how it's specific to your specific market. That's a huge benefit. Just having that peace of mind, knowing that you're making the absolute most that you can with the limited inventory that we have as
Mm-hmm.
short-term rental operators. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So to wrap
Yeah. And
up,
one
Jess,
last, sorry,
oh, go ahead.
one last, can I say one more
Yeah.
thing? Look, this is also why it's so important to look at what we call pacing, because if your summer, like some markets get pretty close to full occupancy, and if you're the only one who still has a unit available, you don't have to charge. You don't have to like discount last minute. You know what I mean? This is
Yep.
kind of the analogy here. Is the if you book a flight 2 days in advance, you sometimes have to pay like 3 times what you would have paid a couple months in advance, right? Now, in the short-term rental industry, we're always in the mindset of like we got a discount last minute. But if you see that demand is really strong and we might sell out altogether, you might actually be able to get a higher price last minute than if you book it up 3 months in advance. So
Ooh,
just want to
I love
mention that
that.
as well. And that's why it's so important to look at the market data.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great tidbit and something that you like. It goes counter to our human nature, and that like feeling of like scarcity, it's not booked, like it's coming up really quickly, and that fear
Yeah.
that happens because we're human. So taking that
Yeah.
emotion out of the decision is amazing.
And think about us being a guest, right? So let's say you want to travel. What's your favorite travel destination in the
Well,
States?
yeah, I mean, thinking of like the fall colors in the North Carolina mountains where I am are so hugely popular. And I'm not a super planner, so I don't necessarily book things 3 months in advance, even though the demand is super high. Like most, or a lot of times, and I've done this in the years past, I'm looking, just like 2 weeks in advance, like, oh, yeah, the colors are really nice. I should go to the mountains. And almost everything is booked.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny because like it's funny how we always fear is a stronger driver than avoiding fear is a stronger driver than seeking pleasure. Something I learned from Tony Robbins, and this is a very clear example of that because think about it: the host is trying to book up the units really far in advance because they're afraid that it won't book. The guest, is booking far in advance because they're worried that the price is going to be too high if they book close to it. So those bite each other, right? So they can't be both true, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
it's funny
So
that we're
true.
both coming, we're both coming from a place of fear of like, I'm worried my units won't book up, and the guest is worried we're gonna pay a really high price last minute. So it's kind of interesting how that works.
Yep. Yeah. Amazing. That was such a little mind blowing tidbit there. I appreciate you sharing that. All right. So to wrap up, Jasper, say somebody is making over $1 million in top line revenue. They're thinking that they're doing okay, but maybe they're not. They're not really sure. What would you say to that human?
Well, I mean, we have a website that you can go to, freewildfoundry.com/rpm. I'm pretty sure we mentioned this on the previous podcast too, but essentially what you can do is you can book a call with us. We'll go through your portfolio, and yeah, we'll just share our findings with you. We'll let you know if we think there's upside. We'll let you know where that biggest upside is. So like what are the major flaws that we see in your pricing strategy or in your marketing, whatever it is. And then we'll either extend an offer to you to work together. But again, we're looking for a very specific operator. If you're especially if you're master leasing and owning, our service could be extremely powerful because if you're managing, if we increase your revenue 20%, but and let's say you have a 25% management fee, then most of that money is going to your owners, right? But if you're master leasing or you own your own units, then that money is going straight in your pocket, right? And so, yeah, it's our service more powerful for owners and master leasing. But yeah, schedule a call with us. If we don't think we're a good fit for you, we'll give you some other direction and resources. And as you mentioned, we have our course as well where you can learn how to become a master revenue manager if you want to do that yourself, and we can advise you as well on whether that's a good decision or not based on where you're at in your business, what your goals are, and on all of that stuff. So yeah, Freewyld, Foundry, freewyld.com/RPM is where it's at. And
Yes. Y instead of an I. Yeah, those assessments, those audits, we call them a snapshot, are completely free for qualified hosts. We do a quick touch point call. You'll chat with Eric, our CEO of Freewyld and Freewyld Foundry first, and then we'll take the data directly from your pricing tool so that we can analyze specifically how you're doing. And Jasper is the mastermind behind all of that, and we'll present the findings to you. So really no risk to just get that clarity and see if anything, if you're leaving funds and money and profit on the table, because it's not every potential client that we've or that you've analyzed, Jasper, that had a really big opportunity for upside, but it has been most of them. Do you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say the majority of the portfolios that we've analyzed, we see an upside somewhere between 10 and 20%. And one thing to notice or to mention as well is we don't want to overpromise, right? So we're typically pretty conservative in our estimate. As an example, like the case study that we showed in the previous episode, right, where we were able to raise that revenue like 30-40% in a couple months. We didn't promise that client that we were going to raise it that much, right? We told them 10 to 15%. Right. So we try to be conservative because we don't want to overpromise. And lastly, like this service is we're really focused on like where can we create a win-win. And when I say win-win, that means like we're taking it over, but our fee is less than the additional money that we're making for you. Right. So then it becomes a no-brainer. And then going back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't want to work with clients that are not happy. So I want our clients to be happy because it's more fun to work with them when they're happy, right?
100%.
So I want to create that win-win. So this is not a service where you're paying for the work. This is a service where we bring so much value to your business that our fee, even after our fee, you're still making more money and you don't have to worry about. Plus, we'll advise you on like other parts of your business. So yeah, I guess it really is a no-brainer, isn't it?
It seriously is. It seriously is. Jasper, thank you so much for letting me play host. I think you might have mentioned this at one point. I used to have my own podcast, but I've since stopped it. So you let me live vicariously through the Get Paid for Your Pad podcast. And I appreciate you so much. For everybody listening, I think I said something similar on our last episode, but if there's more that you're curious about, please let us know. Either send Jasper an email. He is jasper@freewyld.com. Freewyld with a Y, not an I. And or if you are watching on YouTube, leave us a comment and ask questions there, because Jasper and I have a goal to continue this conversation and to keep educating, because this makes such a massive difference. And it's something that so many people are ignoring or just aren't doing to their full potential. So we would love to continue to educate and share what Jasper knows and get it out of his brain for your benefit.
That's right. And last but not least, you've been doing some awesome work when it comes to the direct booking side, because we've been getting some very juicy direct bookings. So
it's finally
we should do an
starting
episode where I interview you.
Yes, I would love that. That would be amazing.
We'll switch roles and we'll talk about marketing.
Yes.
How's that?
That's my brain's happy place. So I am happy to geek out about marketing and everything that we're doing to grow the audience and to increase those direct bookings, because it is working. I love to see it.
That's right. Awesome, Kaye. Well, I appreciate you jumping on here for part 2. It's been an absolute pleasure. To the listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you, like Kaye said, if you have any questions on revenue management, you know where to reach us. we'll be talking a lot more about revenue management. I'm going to interview some of our clients. I'm going to do some solo podcasts as well, kind of just talking about like what do I really do on a day-to-day basis. What am I focusing on? What are the most common mistakes and all of that stuff. So stay tuned for Get Paid for Your Pad. We will be back soon.
Bye now. Thank you.